The birth of a child is the embracing of a new life, blessings and joy. It marks the beginning of a learning journey for the parents that is unlike any other. Here is the experience of our pastor, Dr. Danny Simon, and his family. For a little background, they waited for a very long time to welcome their firstborn. But God had a greater plan for them in their lives. He took them through a season of testing and in His faithfulness blessed them with more than what they could ever ask for. This is a story of what was first meant to be a normal pregnancy, but as time went on, it was beginning to look like nothing was routine about this. However, the light at the end of the tunnel shines so bright that the presence and working of the Divine One was undeniable.
If I remember correctly, it was May 20th, all right, on a Thursday morning that my wife Anu, she gave birth to our third son, Jeremiah Danny Simon. My oldest son is John, he's 7, most of you all know that. My second son, Ethan, he turned 3 in June. And we, one of the things that we've always recognized right from the beginning when it comes to children, we always recognize that, children are a gift from the Lord. We know that, if it was not God, that, it is impossible to have children. One of the things that we have seen, there was a time, in our lives when we could not have children. The doctors had written it off for us. He told us very clearly that it is impossible for you to have children because, my body had issues, my wife Anu's body had issues, and, right through the whole phase, I remember, 6 years into our marriage, we did not have children. We tried all the treatments possible, and when nothing worked out, we left everything. We just left everything into the hands of God, and it was God who blessed us, with John, our oldest son. 7 years ago, 2014, it was on a February 7th that he was born, and that was like a real blessing. It was a surprise, but it was a real miracle, that God actually enabled us to have. And let me be honest with you all, we were not expecting number 2. All right, we were surprised with God's gift of number 2, but we knew that again, God is just blessing us, and we just open-handedly, we just accepted, what God was giving to us. And if I were to be really truthful with you all, I would say, I thought God was done with 2 children. I thought God was done with number 2. There's no more number 3. And we were really surprised, with God's gift of number 3. Now, of course, we were very happy, with the fact that God was giving us number 3. But if you ask me, I didn't know what God was up to. In my mind, what was running at that point of time was, here we go all over again, the diaper changing process, the sleepless nights, and some of you mothers, you probably recognize, some of you fathers also recognize the whole thing. That was the only thing that was running in my mind. I'm thinking, what is God up to? What is He really going to do? And then I don't know if you've ever been in a place where you thought everything is going fine, you had plans, that what you're going to do, and then suddenly, God just surprises you with something which you never expected. And truthfully, that is what happened when we heard the news that she was conceived with our third child. Now, like I said, we were really happy, and of course, the first 2 of our children were boys. So a lot of people, close family, close friends, they came and told us, you had 2 boys, so obviously this has to be a girl. And we were, grateful to God, and because we remember the whole phase that we went through to have our first son, and we were really happy. And regardless, whether it was going to be a boy or girl, we were just thinking and thanking the Lord that, man, this is going to be an added miracle to already everything that God had been doing in our lives. I would say, everything was going fine till the 5th month, where everything changed. I don't know if you've ever been in a place in your lives where, just like that, just in 1 minute or 1 second, or, one fraction of a time, everything that was going smoothly suddenly changes into a place where you realize that, and you thinking to yourself, what is happening and what is going to happen? You've been suddenly shaken up, and that is exactly what we went through when we were called in for what's called as the 5th month scan, or popularly known as the anomaly scan.
They were filled with happiness and were preparing to receive their third child. It was a routine 5-month scan that they had to go for, or was it?
Yeah, I wasn't that worried for that scan because usually in a pregnancy time we say that the first trimester, the first 3 months are very crucial. So if anything has to go wrong, it would happen at that time. So I was really praying that okay, that nothing should go wrong and all during that time, and it went on very smoothly. The third month scan went fine, and even there is a blood test which shows that if there is any chromosomal anomalies, that's called double marker test. So that was also passed with no issues. So I was quite confident, and at the same time, as this doctor was taking a longer time to do the scan, I was wondering what is happening. Is the scan, is there any problem with the machine? And the doctor, he called up another doctor to verify and to cross check. Then I just asked, okay, is there any issue, doctor? So was thinking, okay, maybe the position of the baby or something would have been not very clear. So then the doctor said, yes, there is a problem. Then I am like, okay, but I experienced a tremendous peace at that time. Like, I don't know from where, but I know that God had already prepared me for that.
I want you guys to understand this, okay? So I'm sitting outside, this whole scan room, while all of this is going on inside, and I had no idea. And I came in, I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, normally it shouldn't take too long, and I'm wondering what is going on inside. And then the nurse, she comes out of that room and she calls me in. And she says, yeah, please come in. And because, it's that COVID thing and all of those things are happening, they would only call in the patient. They wouldn't call the entire family. And so the nurse comes out, she calls me, and I'm like, okay, maybe, they want to show me the baby. I mean, after all, I'm the father, I should see the baby. So I go inside expecting nothing, just to see the scan of my third baby. And that's all that I was expecting. And, my wife Anu is lying there, and she's looking at me. The doctor's looking at me with this worried look, and I walk in there and I ask, okay, doctor, how is things, is it okay? And then he looks at me very straightforward and he tells me everything is not okay, there is a problem. And then he takes up the scan, and on the scan machine, whatever you call that, the ultrasound, he shows me the different parts of the baby and shows me and tells many of the problems that is there. And in fact, I've got the ultrasound scan report that was handed down to us after that scan report, and I'll just read that out to you. All right, this was the 5th month scan. It was mentioned that my baby should have multiple congenital anomalies. Okay, it's written hypoplastic nasal bone. So what I understood by that is, the nose, is not formed very well. So he said there is a possibility of a facial deformity. Borderline ventricomegaly. Ventricomegaly is also known as hydrocephalus, where the fluid can just get accumulated in the brain, and the head size of the baby can just grow abnormally large. All right. They also is written in the scan report lumbosacral spina bifida with meningocele and rocker bottom feet. And the last thing that's mentioned on this report is to consider the possibility of a chromosomal anomaly. And can I tell you this? It was a shocker. It was literally I could just feel like someone is just pointing a gun to my head and just shooting me off straight off. And I was shocked, and I didn't know how to process the entire news of this whole thing. And then I asked the doctor at that time, doctor, what would you suggest? Is there anything that we can do for this? And he looks at me and he says, there's nothing that you can really do, but what I would suggest is, I strongly suggest that you terminate this baby. Why go through the risk? You have 2 healthy boys. they just terminate this baby. It's the amount of the problems that this baby has. We don't know if the baby will survive. That's another question mark. But don't go through this whole process. You have two healthy boys. Terminate this baby. And we called up a gynecologist, and the gynecologist said, you please come and meet me straight up. And we went to meet a gynecologist, and the gynecologist is also going on. She's told about a lot of her experiences with different patients who had similar conditions as our baby, and told us it's going to be very difficult to handle this baby. And I'll not forget, one of the statements that she told us was, your life is going to be a living hell. Why do you want to go through that whole process? You have two healthy boys. Terminate this baby. It was strongly, both these doctors, the ultrasound doctor and a gynecologist, were strongly advising us to terminate. Don't go forward with this entire thing.
And one friend even said that, see, you don't be so selfish that you are so adamant in moving forward and having this baby, but the baby will have to go through a lot of surgeries, and even those surgeries won't be successful or won't be like completely curative, and the pain the baby have to go through after the surgeries, and will be too much of a torture for the baby. Why do you want to put the baby, being so selfish, and put the baby to go through such trouble?
There is a plan that logically makes sense, and then there is one that sounds difficult but is perfect in the eyes of God. That said, He doesn't just expect us to walk on burning coals barefoot. He prepares us to make the right decision. Let's listen to what God made clear to the doctor and his wife Anu in their very own words.
So those are the advices we got from the doctors. But then we had like, I still remember when we were coming back from gynecologist, and she even said that you have to make a decision within a week's time, like 2 or 3 days. Within that we have to tell her the decision, because I was just in the 20th week, until 21st you are supposed to do this, and it is allowed legally, the termination. So for me it was like the God was continuously speaking to me that see, this is also a gift from me. So you accepted the first two gifts from me, John and Nathan, and why can we only accept good from God and not trouble, or not something which is not perfect? And at the same time he was also saying that, see, even he is also made in my image, okay? And so then I was like, okay, how can that be possible? But so God was saying, I have I have made him in my own image, and always strongly God was saying that life and death is in His hand, and we are not supposed to take it in our hands. Then God immediately told me, see, if baby has to go through it, God will give baby and me the strength to go through it, the grace to go through it. Just like how when Jesus, he gave me this picture of Jesus on the cross, and Jesus getting all the stripes on him, the beatings on him, and the Mother Mary was watching it. Mother Mary was witnessing all that, okay? And Jesus took all this upon him for a purpose, and Jesus also had the grace, and Mother Mary also had the grace to go through that phase. So then God said, see, if that is the case, I will give you the immense strength and the grace you need to pass this stage.
For me, there was a different struggle altogether, because again, they were all looking to me to make the decision. I'm the father, I'm the leader, I'm the husband. I mean, I'm the one who has to make the final decision. And these two things are weighing on my mind. Should I actually terminate this baby? What if life is going to be a living hell? I mean, one of us would have to stay back and take care of this baby, the rest of his or her life, at that point of time. So I'm thinking to myself, what, is it really worth it? On one end I'm thinking, and I remember I even came to a point where I thought, and maybe we should just go ahead and terminate. Why should we actually go through this whole, this mind? One way it was working in that direction, in the other way it was working on one side, like what Anu just shared, about the whole idea that, you've accepted two perfect gifts from the Lord. You know, we never had this question mark of termination or abortion or anything like that when John had come in, because he was perfect, he didn't have any flaws. You know, Ethan came in, there was no flaws, and there was never a question of, you know, abortion or anything like that during that time. And why now? I felt God was literally asking me this: I've sent you two healthy boys and you accepted this. Will you not accept this child simply because the doctor said there's so many problems? And he asked me a question which I felt very strongly in my heart: will you trust me through this whole process? And you know, we prayed over the whole thing, and I remember the second thing that came in my mind, you know, I was asking myself, you know, one day I'm going to see my baby in heaven. If I do this termination now, I'm going to see this baby in heaven. And you know, in heaven, when my baby comes up to me and he asks me, Papa, you didn't give me a chance to come into this world because you thought I was imperfect. What was I going to tell my child at that day? I'm going to trust the Lord. God knows what He is up to. God is still on that throne. All of these, you know, reports that's come in is not unknown to Him. He can still take and do something out of this whole situation. And that's when, you know, both of us, me and Anu, we decided that, you know what, no matter what is going to happen, if like our gynecologist said, our life is going to be like a living hell, so be it. We are going to, you know, go forward with this pregnancy, come what may. We don't know what we're going to get into. We don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to trust the Lord that God is going to take care of every single thing that is going to come in the whole process.
Yes, God affirms on His promises, but we do feel weak in the spirit sometimes. What do we do when we hit rock bottom during those tough days?
You know, the next 4 months, you know, was probably the most difficult months of our lives. I remember one day, you know, I decided to call up all of my doctor friends who are well versed in, you know, all of these things, and I asked them, okay, what are the possible surgeries, you know, considering all the things that's come on the scan report, what are the possible surgeries, what are the possible treatment modalities that, you know, we will have to go through as a family. And they kept mentioning this one by one. And I remember, you know, listening that whole day. I was just on the phone trying to figure out, okay, which is the best hospital to be in, you know, for the delivery, if my baby has to go through all of these surgical processes, and a lot of those, you know, research work. I remember at the end of that day, I was so discouraged. I had literally hit rock bottom. And I will not kid you when I say this, okay, in these last 4 months, you know, our faith, there has been days when our faith has rocketed sky high. You know, we were like, man, filled with faith, God is going to do something. We were really rock solid sure. And I'll be honest with you, there were days in those last 4 months, you know, those 4 months where our faith had literally rock bottom, where we thought, man, what is going to happen? We didn't know how to comfort ourselves, how to comfort each other. We were like so discouraged and so defeated. And one of the things that, you know, we decided as a family, even during those 4 months was that, you know, we're going to pray every single day. You know, we went through, you know, the scriptures. We took out all the healing verses that we could possibly find. We started claiming every one of those scriptures, and I'm not kidding. Every single day, every morning, both me and Anu, we would wake up, we would spend time with God, we would ask God, we don't know what we're getting into, we don't know what we are going to go through, you know, in this after the delivery is done, but we believe that, you know, you are a God who can bring miracles, you are a God who can heal, and we're going to believe in you for the very best of what is going to happen to our baby. And you know, right through those 4 months, you know, God kept speaking, ministering to both of us, and He gave us a lot of promised scriptures. And one of the scriptures, you know, that God had literally confirmed, you know, through Pastor and, you know, through different sources, was one scripture from John's Gospel, chapter 9, you know, verse 3. And I'll tell you the context of what is happening there. Basically, there's a man who needs to be healed. Jesus has come forth. The Pharisees are standing alongside Jesus, and they're asking, you know, Jesus this question, you know, why is this man's condition like this? Is it because, you know, of the parent's sin that, you know, he's in this condition, or is it because of his sin that he is in this condition? And you know, Jesus' response, you know, to that was what really I felt God was confirming or ministering to us. Jesus answered, in that scripture, John's Gospel 9 verse 3, he said, neither this man nor his parents have sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. And we felt very strongly that, this was what God was telling us. The reason why I'm allowing you to, both of you, to go through this situation is because my works are going to be displayed, in this baby. And you've got to learn to trust in me right through that whole process. And this was the only thing that we were really holding on to. And again, 8th month came in. There's an 8-month scan also, and this time the whole scenario was very different. I'm still sitting outside that waiting room, out of the ultrasound center. My wife goes in, she's there, and I'm thinking, okay, now how long is it going to take? But she walks out of that scan room in the 8th month within just 10 minutes. And I asked her, how come you're back so soon? What happened? What did the doctor say? And she said the doctor didn't say anything. The doctor just said the scan report is the same as it was before. The only difference from this time scan report is that in the 5th month, everything, the measurements were small. Now it's just a little bigger in size, and nothing has changed. And this is the 8th month, okay? The next month, the delivery is supposed to be due, and we're thinking, man, all these, these 3 months, God has not done anything. Is that what, God wanted us to understand? And like I said, it was a tug of war, that kept going on inside our minds, all these times. And come May 20th, Thursday morning, all right, that's the morning that we were supposed to go in, for the delivery. And that morning I remember getting up, and both me and Anu, we thought, okay, man, we need to pray even today before we go into the labor room or the hospital for the delivery. And we're thinking, what are we going to pray? And we prayed, and the only two things, the two portions of scripture which God literally revealed to us in that morning, I'll not forget, was one was from the story of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. And if you remember that story, just before they were being about to be thrown into the fiery furnace, God literally the king was standing there, and they asked these 3 men, what is it that you're expecting, or what is it that you're looking at? And they told, the response to the king was very simple. They told God, they told the king who was standing there, we know that our God can deliver us from this situation if he wants to, but know this, even if he doesn't, we will still not bow down to you, but we will continue to worship our Lord. And that was our prayer that morning. We told the Lord, we know that you can deliver us from this situation if you want to, but know this, Lord, even if you don't, we will still continue to worship you, we will still continue to serve you. And the second portion of scripture, I'll not forget, was from the story of Mary, Martha and Lazarus' story. And if you remember that story, Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus, to be healed from that sickness that he was suffering with, but Jesus deliberately held himself back. And the story, Lazarus dies, but Jesus still comes on the scene, and even though he couldn't heal Lazarus, he was able to raise him from the dead. And one thing, the assurance that God was giving into both of our hearts was, even though God does not do anything right now, it is still possible for him to do a miracle, in the time to come.
The moment of truth had finally arrived. What was running through their minds? With all that they had heard and all that they had expected, what was going to come their way after the child was born?
And the pediatrician goes back into the labor room. Next 45 minutes to about 1 hour, the pediatrician comes out of the labor room holding my son in his hands. And he's covered the baby with a sheet on the body, and you can just see the face, okay, and the face looks beautiful, all right, because one of the scan reports said there's a nasal this thing, and there could be a facial deformity, but there's no facial deformity. He looks perfect, all right. They said the head size could be a little larger than normal, but the head size looked perfectly normal to me. And then the doctor comes to me, and he raises up the sheet that was covering his body, and behind of his body, near the spinal area, was an opening, and there was a fluid that was leaking out from that. And the condition, okay, I'll just tell you this, the condition that they labeled it, or they termed it as, is called as a leaking meningocele. So when our son was born, there was these two primary conditions that was there. One was the hydrocephalus, where this the cerebrospinal fluid, they say, should normally be pumped out into the abdomen and it should just go out. But our baby's that functionality was not working properly, so the fluid was getting accumulated. The second condition was called a spina bifida, where the back of his the spine was not completely closed up. It was not developed normally there, and they said there's a meningocele present. A meningocele is what I understood, it's something like a cyst where it's just obstructing the nerves and everything that is there. And these two were the main primary conditions that he was born with. And in my mind, when I'm looking at my baby, I'm thinking to myself, 4 months we prayed all the healing scriptures that was there, and God didn't heal my baby. And the question that ran in my mind was, why God? Why? I mean, what is it that you want us to go through? And despite all of the promises, despite everything that was there, there was this strong thing that was coming in my mind. What's going on?
They were blessed with a baby boy. However, with the second wave of the pandemic in full swing and the present health condition of the baby, the battle was far from over.
This was happening in May. Alright, if you remember correctly, May was the month that they had declared the second lockdown. That was the time when the second wave was at its peak. Alright, and here I found myself literally for the next 1 week, I found myself shuttling between two hospitals in midst of COVID. And I'm not joking when I say this, okay? In front of my eyes, just a few meters away from me, I've literally seen COVID patients being transported or shifted into the hospital with the nursing staff and the doctors. All of them are having their PPE kit, and I'm just wearing a normal t-shirt and jeans, and I'm just standing there and I'm like, okay, you move so that I can move forward, kind of a thing. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't have time to think about all of these things, Lord. This is all on you. You take care. If COVID is the last thing that I need to think about at this point. And I remember, that morning, they like I said, within half an hour he shifted into KMC. And now this is where God starts working, and I didn't realize it, and God literally had to hold me and say, Danny, take notice of what is happening, because I am walking with you, in this fire.
The baby required a scan not more than a couple days after he was born. It was after this that the doctors could decide on what to do next. God is perfect in His timing. The following moments just proved it again.
Like I said, this neurosurgeon is supposed to be the best neurosurgeon in Bangalore and Manipal, and it's not easy to get him. It's very difficult to get him on, and even on an appointment basis, it's very difficult to get him. That morning he was scheduled for another surgery, but for some reason that surgery got cancelled, and this neurosurgeon was free right through the whole day. And he comes in, he takes a look at my baby, and he immediately refers, for an MRI scan. And the MRI scan, they immediately call up the MRI scan center, KMC Mangalore, okay. They call up the MRI scan center and they asked, okay, is it free? And apparently it was free that day. They wheel my baby, from the NICU straight off into the MRI scan room, all right. And they take my baby inside. Within a period of 40-45 minutes, they wheel him back into the NICU, and they're like, okay, now we just need to wait for the MRI report to come in and all of those things. And I said, okay, fine. And but they said that it would take time. So we go back, to where Anu was. Anu was in another hospital. So my friend and me, we go back, into that place, into the place where Anu was admitted. And that whole day I had not eaten food. So we go into the canteen. We're having some coffee in that evening. And one of a person, who was working in the Yenapoya scan center was known to us. She comes in and she knows that, the whole delivery has happened that day. She comes in into where we're having coffee, and she sits down and she's having coffee with us. So I have no idea what's going on. I mean, there's just like one after the other things are going on. And I remember both of them, my friend who was with me the whole day and this girl, who was working in the scan center, they were both talking to each other. And she asked my friend this question, how was it possible that, you were able to do the MRI scan today itself? And my friend, he looks at her and he says, I'm also shocked that, the fact that they was immediately able to complete the MRI scan. And I'm sitting there having coffee. Okay, now Okay, I'm from the medical side. Okay, but for me, I'll be honest, I have no clue about the MRI scan. I have no clue about this. For me, in my mind, the whole MRI scan thing was, you take the patient into this, the X-ray kind of a room. They take the X-ray and you bring the patient out. That's the only thing that's running in my mind. And I told them, isn't that what all it is? And both of them, they're staring down at me and they're asking me. They're looking at me, and my friend is telling me, no Danny, that's not how an MRI scan is done. You need to understand, there's a lot of things that needs to be looked into before an MRI scan can actually be, the procedure can actually take place. And that's when they started explaining to me that, normally you need to take a prior appointment to schedule an MRI scan. Why? Because they need an anesthetist to be present there. They need, the scan center to be free. All of these things put together. They also said that, they always need to make sure that the crash cart is also ready right next to you. If something goes wrong during the MRI scan, or unless all of these things are in place, they would never take an MRI scan. And I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, and I asked them, what was the need for an anesthetist to be present in the MRI scan? And they said, they call newborn baby, the medical terminology is neonate. All right, they said, because neonates, it's the whole procedure. The MRI scan is a 40-45 minute procedure, and they don't want the patient to move this side, that side. If the patient moves this side or that side, the MRI scan won't come properly. And they said, because he's a neonate, because he's a baby, babies cannot stay still, right? So they might have to give an anesthesia so that the baby doesn't move this side, that side. But what's the thing? Jeremiah, all right, just before the scan started, he fell asleep. And believe it or not, for the next 40-45 minutes, he slept right through the procedure. And I remember, that was another shock, because the MRI scan procedure is actually a very loud process. And, for the baby to sleep right through that noisy procedure, 40-45 minutes without waking up, was a miracle by itself. And I remember, sitting there in that coffee table there with both of them as they're explaining these things to me, I felt the Spirit of God was literally telling me, Danny, I don't want you to miss what is happening. You thought it was just an easy process, get an MRI scan, and no. Listen, I am walking with you right through this whole process. The only reason that they're able to complete the MRI scan, because I am there with you, and I don't want you to miss what's happening.
A medical situation can become quite expensive. In the midst of all that was going on, they still needed to pay the hospital bills. What happened subsequently was another tick in the list of miracles God did that day.
I remember, one of the girls, that we knew, she was in Bangalore at that time, and she had texted me saying, Danny, my parents have been praying, for the entire situation, and we felt very strongly to send you a good amount, because we know the whole cost process is going to go up a little high. We wanted to send you a gift amount, from our side, financially we wanted to send you some money. And I remember, and I told them, listen, you don't have to do that. I told them very clearly, listen, you don't have to do this, all right? As it is, you're showing a lot of love, you're praying for us, and that itself is a big thing. We don't want you to send any amount, just relax, forget about it. And, we're texting each other, and I'm trying to convince this girl that, don't send the money. And before I know it, within the next 15 minutes, she wires across, a good amount of money straight into my account. And I noticed this, and now I'm like thinking, man, why does she have to do this? And now, I go back on texting and I'm trying to tell her, listen, you don't have to do this. Why did you send this money? Tell your parents, we're good, we're this, we're that. Within half an hour, I kid you not, within half an hour, I get a call from the reception, in the hospital where Anu was. She calls up, the receptionist, she calls up, from the billing section there, and they call me and they tell me, doctor, we just called because, you've not paid any advance amount, for the delivery, and we're wondering if it's all right with you to give us an advance amount. And I asked her, I asked the person, what's the amount that you want me to pay? I said, yeah, I don't have an issue. How much is the amount that you want me to pay? And believe it or not, the amount that they quoted was the exact same amount that was wired into my account just a few minutes back. And I'm just blown, I'm just overwhelmed, and I'm thinking to myself, what is happening? What is happening? just a few minutes back, I'm trying to convince this girl that, man, you didn't have to do that. And she said her parents had prayed and, the Lord had prompted them to send this amount. And here I'm sitting with, them asking the exact same amount that, that was wired just a few minutes back into my account. And I'm asking myself, what is going on? What is going on? And that is when I could sense the Spirit of the Lord was telling me again, listen, Daddy, don't miss it. I'm walking with you right through this whole process.
As much as this was a season of learning for the family, it wasn't like the people around did not notice what was going on. When they spoke up, people around them were touched.
The reason why we didn't abort, the reason why we didn't terminate was two specific reasons. One is because we know there was a point in our lives when we did not have children. And we recognize that children are a gift from the Lord. And we know this baby, even though he has all of these problems, all of these things, we know that he is a gift that God has given to us. And that's one of the reasons, that we have decided that we're not going to terminate this baby. And, this doctor looks at, he hears his response and he's like a little, overwhelmed kinds. And he says, well, that's a good decision, all right. So we're going to go forward. And then he explains, what the problem was. And he told us, like I said earlier, one of the conditions that Jeremiah had was the condition that's called as a meningocele. And he said, according to the textbook, meningocele should lead to meningitis and your baby should die. And what I want to do is I want to save your baby's life. And I asked the doctor, so what is it that you want to do? He said, listen, we're going to take him onto the surgery table. We're going to place what's called as a shunt. Shunt is basically a tube that drains the fluid, from the excess fluid straight into the abdomen. We're going to do that. And we are also going to close up, we're going to remove the meningocele from the back and we're going to close up, doing a flap surgery, we're going to close up the entire back of the baby. And, he told me this, he said, normal cases, I wouldn't, rush surgery on a newborn baby. He's just born on a Thursday, okay, and this doctor wanted to do the surgery on a Saturday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Just within one day, he wanted to push Jeremiah in onto the surgery table. And he said, I wouldn't do that normally, but like I said, I'm trying to save the baby's life. And I remember, telling the doctor, I don't know, but if you feel that's the best way to go about it, you just go ahead and do it. And then that's when he looks at me and he makes a statement. He says, I've seen you since yesterday. That is Thursday. He's seen me the whole day there, in and out of the MRI room, the NICU, everywhere. He's seen me there. And he's seen me today also. And he said, you seem to be in perfect peace. All right. I don't know how you're having that perfect peace, but please maintain that perfect peace, even as we move forward. And that was another shocker to me because, he's a non-believer. And like I said, I believe the only place I normally hear peace is that word is normally used, amongst believers. And he's a non-believer telling me that verse and he's observed, that perfect peace. And he's saying, listen, you need to somehow maintain that peace. I come back, all right, and they're scheduling him for surgery the next day. And that whole, that night, we went back to sleep, all right. And the next morning, I think I woke up at around 5 in the morning. And I knew that, I had to pray.
When we face life, it is not always a steady path. It is filled with ups and downs. How do we face moments of despair and fear? Here is what our pastor has to say in retrospect to what had transpired that day.
And I remember, for the first time, I remember that I think it started, just at that night, going into the next morning, I could feel a sinking feeling that was coming on the inside. There was a strong pull, that was like literally pulling you down. It was literally, just pushing you down kind of. I could feel the strong push, that was coming in. And the next morning, I realized, for the first time in my, the last 2 days or last 3 days, I realized that there is a possibility that I might lose Jeremiah, after this whole process is over. That, I may not be able to see him alive. And that thought literally was very, very crippling, very, very, pulling down kind of a thing. It was like a weight that was just hanging on so strongly on you. And I just struggled, that morning I tried to pray 5 to 7. What are you going to pray? there was nothing that was coming into my mind, to pray. And I remember it was around 7 o'clock, and I knew that I had to rush, into the hospital because they needed, the consent form and all of those things before they took Jeremiah into the OT, the operation theatre. And I told, I remember telling the Lord that morning, told the Lord, I realized that, that today might be a day where I may not see Jeremiah again. And I know that, after this surgery, there is a possibility that I may not see him again, that he's coming home to you. And I told the Lord, that's a good thing, that, he's not coming back with us, but he's coming back home to you. And I don't understand it, but I know it's a good thing that he's coming back home to you. But I also know this, Lord, that if everything goes well after today, there is a possibility that Jeremiah will come back home with us. And I told the Lord, that's also a good thing. And I remember telling the Lord that morning the same thing I told the doctor the previous day. What you feel best, Lord, you do.
The time for the surgery had finally arrived. Anticipation can get the best out of anyone when we face a high-risk situation. We probably cannot imagine what Pastor Danny would have been thinking while waiting outside the operation theatre. God was working behind the scenes all this while, not only to speak to the family, but also through them.
And I remember just, surrendering Jeremiah completely into the Lord's hands. I told the Lord, if you want to take him back today, do it. If you think, it's okay for him to come back home with us, so you do it. You figure out what's the best thing to do, Lord, and you do it. And, I said that, and I remember going back, into the OT. I was waiting outside, and like I said, COVID, okay, and there's no patients that morning. The only surgery that was scheduled that morning in that OT was my son's surgery. And the thing is, what the neurosurgeon had told me the previous day was it might take roughly around 2.5 hours to place a shunt. It might take another 2.5 hours to place, to complete the flap surgery. And I remember sitting outside that OT, with my friend who was sitting with me that day morning. It took around 7 hours, for the entire surgery to take place, to get completed. And I remember sitting outside, like I said, that sinking feeling just kept coming in. I remember sitting outside because there's no word of what is happening inside the OT. I remember sitting outside the OT and I'm thinking to myself, what? Is it over? Have they lost him? Are they trying to resuscitate the baby? I mean, what's going on inside? Is it? And all of these, mixed thoughts were just coming into my mind. My friend was talking and I only could hear half of what he was telling me, but all of these things were just going on into my mind. I remember 7 hours, after 7 hours, the nurse, who from inside the OT, she comes out, and I'll never forget the expression on her face and the words that she said. She came out of the OT and she said, "Usharuntu." Baby Usharuntu. And I'm standing there listening to her, and I didn't know what to make out of it. I'm like, okay, Usharuntu means what? Is everything gone well, or is the baby healthy, or what's happened? And the only thing I could feel inside of my heart at that point of time was like, Danny, at least he's alive. At least he's made it. At least everything has gone into a place where you can at least see him alive. Again, cut the long story short, okay, they shift, Jeremiah back into the NICU. I see the doctors, and both the doctors, the plastic surgeon who did the flap surgery and the neurosurgeon, who did the shunting, both of them were very, very, very happy. They look pretty comfortable. They look pretty, confident, that, man, everything has gone well. And, everything went smoothly. And in that evening, I'll not forget this, the neurosurgeon had come to see Jeremiah in the NICU one last time before he went back home for that particular day. And he comes in, he sees Jeremiah, everything seems to be fine. And he comes out of the NICU, I'm standing there with my friend. He looks at me and he says, well, everything seems to have worked out much better than what we expected. And then he takes his deep pause, he takes his deep breath, and he says, well, yeah, you're right, God is there. And he just walks off. I'm like, okay, man, God has done something there, I think. And for the next few days, I'll not, again, there's so many things that I can actually share about, but the next few days, I remember so many times, like I said, the first time I was asked that question, why didn't you hear this news of the 5th month and why didn't you terminate, was a question that was, I think, in the minds of the nursing staff who was there in the NICU, the pediatrician who was looking over, Jeremiah during those 10 days. There was a urologist who walked in, to make sure everything is fine from his urological point of view. All of these doctors had one question in their mind, what made you do this? And I remember every time I shared this story, one of the things I have to tell you this, the nurse, the main nurse who was there in the NICU, she comes and she looks at, Jeremiah's legs, and they said, yeah, it seems to be, there's some problem with the legs, and she looks at me and she tells me that, doctor, don't worry, you need to believe in the power of science. I'm just standing there and I'm looking at her, and I told the sister, listen sister, you need to understand, I do believe in the power of science, okay, and that's the reason why we are here, and that's the reason why all of this, we allowed all of the surgery to take place, but I believe in a higher power, and I believe there is a power that God delivers, is a power of God which is much more and above the power of science. And that's the power I believe, and I wish you could have seen the expression on her face. And she was the main chief nurse kind of a lady there, and there were other nurses just around her. All of them were like just like wonderstruck, man, what is he saying? And they didn't know what to say. They literally look at me and they're like, man, we don't know what to tell, we've never heard anything like this before. And that was literally the words that nurse told me. I've never heard anything, man. The faith that you have, man, I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, even when the baby was in the NICU with all the tubes and everything attached on him, like sometimes we feel, okay, yeah, how is he there, or is he being taken care of by the nurses there? And because we hear a lot of things that, okay, like if the nurses are not so alert and all that, how things can go wrong and all that. But then one thing God kept telling us is like, see, I was the one who took care of the baby when baby was in my womb. Even inside my womb, we didn't have any control over the baby. So the same God is there even there. You have to completely trust in me, and it is the God and his angels who watch over the baby at that time. It's not the nurses. So that we could literally see the hand of God on the baby. Like baby actually recovered so fast after the surgery, could say, because we expected and we heard even that the baby will definitely take some weeks together or months in the NICU and or in the hospital, and it would take some time. So we were like a little prepared for the longer period in the hospital, but it took only 10 days, like I think only 8 days in the NICU, and immediately like the baby were really well, coping well and taking the feed, and even started taking the mother's milk directly. So all that was like quickly done. So even the nurses and everybody was so surprised, like, okay, how can the baby be so recovering so well? So that there also we saw the hand of God, and all around we could see God's favor. Like when God takes us through a testing time or a period like this, God will bring people all around us, and his immense favor will be upon us. He will not leave us alone.
And that's literally what we saw. Okay, like I said, all of these things, every moment, we could just sense that God was telling us, listen, I'm walking with you. You're not walking in this fiery furnace alone. I'm there walking with you. And he literally, like I said, he literally had to take hold of me and say, Danny, look. And I don't think if he had not done that, because our minds was completely just running from one thing to the another thing. If God had not taken us and shown us what was happening, I think we would have missed the whole fact, and I don't think we would have been able to be strong right through that whole process of everything that baby Jeremiah had to literally go through. And I just I'll not forget the expression on the gynecologist's face. So we go in to meet her gynecologist for a post checkup. That was after
40 days.
After 40 days, and and she examines her, everything is fine, and and then she asks this question, well, how's the baby? And we told her, the same thing that we told everybody: baby is doing really well. All right, the baby looks perfect, there's no facial deformity, and one of the things that one of the conditions that was there in that scan report was that he was supposed to be diagnosed with Rocker's feet. There was no Rocker's feet. We had him examined by an orthopedic pediatrician, and he examined the legs and he said, no, the feet is perfect, it's just the muscles that needs to be a little more activated kinds. And we're amazed at what God has done.
Through it all, God was hinting at something deeper about His faithfulness and capability. We assume that God probably is not going to answer our prayer just because He does not do it the way we expect Him to. But here is what Pastor Danny has concluded from the entire experience.
Not just walking with us, but even in terms of healing. And here's something that I learned, that I would say that we both as a family, we learned through this whole process was, there are times when we ask the Lord, we're praying, God, we want to see this happen, we want to see that happen, and many times God doesn't seem to answer our prayers directly. Many times God kind of puts a lid down and says, I'm not going to answer your prayers the way that you think I should answer it. And like I said earlier, God didn't heal our baby Jeremiah the way that we thought He should or He would. We thought, man, he would be a normal baby, by the time he came out. Of course, we knew that God was preparing us at the same time, through this whole process, that we would have to go through this. And when I look back today, I realized that, man, if Jeremiah was truly healed completely from everything that was there mentioned in that scan report, yes, God would have still got the glory. But what we would have missed out is being able to stand as living witnesses and testimonies in front of those doctors, in front of those nurses, and being able to declare, that we still believe in a God. He's alive and He still does miracles even today. And we had no reason to meet, these doctors otherwise. I mean, imagine if everything had gone well, we would just have to go, and go back home, and we would have a normal baby. And God wanted all of these things so that His name would be glorified and would be known to all those people inside of that hospital. One of the reasons that even we named him Jeremiah was because a lot of things that God had promised us from Jeremiah, but most of you remember this verse, you would recollect it because we use this verse sometimes to claim promises. His ways are much higher than our ways, and His thoughts are much higher than our thoughts. And when we look back at our story and the story of Jeremiah, about what Jeremiah has been through, we truly believe that God's ways were much better than our ways, and God's thoughts are much better or much higher than our thoughts as well. And like I said, he's awake right now. So like I said, okay, I mean this is incredible. All right, hypoplastic nasal bone. I want you to take a look at Jeremiah, all right, and I want you to see his nose, I want you to see his face, all right. And I don't think if it weren't for God that he would be the way that he is right now.
We face challenges in our lives that sometimes look like unmovable mountains, but with every challenge comes an opportunity to be a witness of God's working in not just our lives, but also in the lives of the ones around us. We hope this testimony encourages you to face your battles head on with the power of God on your side. May the Lord bless you and keep you.